Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost podcast. Today we're going to be talking about something that I believe is going to be a transformational conversation for you. And we're going to be talking about how to monetize your mind. The reason why I believe this is going to be transformational for you is because we have your mind, which feels like something intangible, and then we have money, which is something tangible. So we want to turn that intangible stuff to something tangible, right? So I believe it's something that can change the game for you in your business, in your career, in your home, in your family, and in whatever it is that you do. And guess what? I have someone on the show with me who has actually walked the walk, and he doesn't only walk the walk, he also talks the talk in the person of Tiran Jackson, a professional public speaker, and he has a lot of things, beautiful things, and wonderful things that I can say about him. But I'm going to leave all of that good stuff to him so that he can have more than enough to say when he introduces himself. So I'm going to bring him up stage now. Hi, Tiran or
Hey,
Tyran.
how you doing, Doppy? It's good to see you again, man. It's great to be back once again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I forgot to mention that he's a repeat guest, and I'm so glad to have you on the show. So, thank you so much for coming again. And yeah, I'm going to pass the baton over to you so that you can do us the justice of giving us your introduction.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. My name is Tyran Jackson. I'm first and foremost a resiliency expert.
Hmm.
And I say that because that is what my business, my brand, and really the core of who I am, what it's centered around.
Hmm.
Now, I've been able to take that expertise and leverage it and use it as a professional speaker, speaking
Hmm.
on stages to thousands, as well as being able to go into coaching, helping others who are going through some level of trauma, tragedy, or transition make the transformations in their life to be triumphant again. And so I'm a certified life coach. Like I said, I help people who are in places where they're stagnant and stuck and loosen it up so they can move forward powerfully. And so I'm an entrepreneur. And I believe it or not, I've got an engineering background. That's what I thought I was
Wow.
going to be doing. But when I talk about transformation and going through changes, we sometimes go through pivots and changes in life, and life took me down a different direction. But it didn't just take me in a direction from a standpoint of purpose, which is most important, but it also led to a direction of prosperity that I love to talk about even more as we get into this topic. So thank you so
Awesome.
much again.
That is awesome, and it's super exciting to hear because I also have an engineering background, so we have kind of like a kindred spirit. But that, by the way, can we get into the meat of our conversation today by talking about what the whole idea of monetizing your mind is? First of all, how can you say that something intangible can be monetized? We live in this world where we've grown up and we've been told for many years that you needed to have something tangible to be able to sell it or to be able to monetize it. But we are coming into a paradigm right now where we are discovering, or we have discovered, that you don't even have to create a physical product before you can monetize your mind. So that is the crux of our conversation today. And so I want you to start from there and just lay that foundation as we begin to unpack this conversation.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna nerd out for a second here and go back to the whole engineering aspect of it because I look at it from the stand. I was a mechanical engineer to
Wow.
start off, and when I was doing that, I was concerned about how we take energy in one form from
Hmm.
a feel standpoint and turn that into something that is creating motion or rotation.
Hmm.
And you might not understand everything that goes into how to make that happen, but you see something go from one state to another.
Yeah.
Going forward, you could go from a mechanical state, and how do you create electrical power to light your lights and
Yeah.
everything? Well, there is a series of systems in which you go through a conversion in order to turn that mechanical power into electricity that we see. Similar to what we do with what we have with our minds. We may have thoughts, we may have ideas, we may
Hmm.
have something that is core, that is our foundation. But the key is understanding how to make it be something to monetize. And here's where it comes down to my understanding as an entrepreneur. The thoughts, the beliefs, the ideas, the strategies, the everything that you have, The key is to figure out what problem is going to solve for somebody else or something else.
Hmm.
We've got our experiences, we've got the things that we've gone through in our life, the obstacles we've overcome. And what I've learned is if I can be able to break that down to a process where it not only work for myself, but can work for the most part for other people, then what I've now created is a process that's transferable, something that can be used to help other people get from a starting point where they may be stuck and stagnant in life to a place where they are thriving and prosperous. And it may be emotionally, it may be within their career, it may be with their relationships. But to understand that the process is the key. And that's where you can take your inherent understanding, your inherent knowledge, and use that to create value. In other way, that's what it comes down to: the value that you're providing for others and the problems that you're solving by whatever you bring to the table. And that can be in multiple forms. I know we talked about it's easier with physical forms. When you have books, for instance, you have something that somebody can buy and hold and feel, and they exchange cash for that. That's a tangible product. We have multiple products that are out there in the world that make life easier. But then when it comes to the side of needing to take something that is less tangible, that knowledge, that information, that guidance, that expertise, then the key is to figure out how do I convert it in the right way for the right person to be able to get the maximum benefit out of it. And,
Wow.
and that's what I think the key is from an entrepreneur standpoint.
Absolutely. And you made a very key analogy there with your illustration by talking about the systems and talking about the change of state of energy levels, how energy can go from one state to another, how we have a dynamo, which is like the system we spoke about. A dynamo can convert mechanical energy to electrical energy, right? And thoughts are things, thoughts are energy, right? Thoughts represent energy. It's another form of energy. And many people have great ideas, but they struggle with being able to convert those ideas in a systemic way to tangible creations or profitable solutions. In other words, things that fetch them money, tangible
Yeah.
money. And that's the whole idea of creativity boost. In fact, that's part of the core of what I do as a creativity coach, to help people experience that transmutation of their ideas, take their ideas from their head, instead of taking it to their grave, take it and turn it into income, turn it into impact, turn it into independence. And you talked about systems. So how do we create systems from an idea, or systems that turn ideas into income? How do we do that? If you have someone listening to us right now that has great ideas and doesn't have money or doesn't have capital but wants to create capital from that idea, because for me, I feel like when you have the right idea with the right systems, you can actually create cash flow, you can
Mhm.
create capital. That's why when people tell me capital is their problem, is people say I'm creative but I don't have capital. I'm like, you just spotted the problem. You don't have capital. And then you have the solution in your statement. You said you are creative. So if you're creative, through your creativity, you'll figure out how to figure out or how to find capital, right? So, and that brings us to this conversation. That's part of why we're here. So now, how do we help someone who has an idea but doesn't know what to do with it to
Yeah.
take that and turn it into income or impact or independence?
I think that's where we're having the right guidance, the right coaching, and then going back to what you said with the systems to be able to take that idea and create something that can be monetizable. I know that's not
Hmm.
a real word out of it. I remember I had my story, I had my journey, but I didn't necessarily know how to package and position it in a way that it would bring value to others and that it could also bring income to myself so I could sustain and move
Hmm.
forward. What I found is that sometimes, and it's hard to do it on your own when you haven't seen it done.
Hmm.
But when you see people who have created the processes to be able to take the right CRM, to
Hmm.
understand how to get the proper awareness out there in the marketplace, you don't want to be the best secret no one knows about. But
Hmm.
then if you are able to provide your nuggets of insight, you're operating your zone of genius and have others see it, and you can communicate and relate to the problems that they're facing and what you do to solve, then it becomes how do I package that? How do I position that? For those who have ideas in their mind, I found a place with online courses that can be a source of profit, of sharing information that I know but others may be interested in knowing. I found in the source of ebooks that's a way of being able to create a digital product that can work to be able to solve a problem for others. But then understanding that, and we have so many advantages now in this world of social media. You can have people anywhere in the world see what you're doing, what you're providing, but you have to be willing to essentially market and advertise yourself and what you do. And I found that through doing that, I've been able to get customers from everywhere
Wow.
that I would not be able to access had I not been open to sharing on platforms such as that. So once you've got the audience and the marketplace, then it comes to the structure and the setup that you have within your systems. Where are you going to house your content or your information that's going to teach somebody how to overcome the biggest obstacles in their life? For me, I had to go through this whole thing of grief recovery. So where am I going to be able to direct people who are stuck in their loss but don't know what that next step to take is in order to move forward? That's either an online course or that comes through working with me directly. And that's where the one-on-one coaching or the small group coaching comes into play, because these are ways to take that knowledge in your mind and that experience that you had and be able to monetize it into something of value. And so one other thing I want to state is there's another part of this that goes into um, being able to know how to properly price the value of what you provide for what people are willing to pay for it. And
Hmm.
there is a whole supply and demand aspect to that as well. But yeah, but that's something that I found that once you start to realize the sweet spot to provide the full value that makes sense to your customer base as well as to what it takes of you to do it, then you are operating in a step space where you can be profitable and be prosperous.
Wow. So here's what I'm gathering from what you've said so far. You have to learn how to package, position, pitch, and price
Mm,
your
yes.
payoff or your promise for people, or your product for people, or your intangible product for people, in a way that gets them to take advantage of it and helps you monetize your mind. So, can we dive deep into these different
Oh,
aspects, one
yes.
one after the other? And I want us to start from the pricing, because that's where the juice, it's not just there, but I feel that's where a lot of people miss it, right?
Mhm.
And if we can reverse engineer the process and start from the end, it will be
Yeah.
easy for people to follow us right back to the beginning. So can we talk about the pricing aspect and then take them back?
Yeah. So when I do, for instance, I speak for organizations and companies and for different events. When I'm starting to go through and determine how much my starting point is from that pricing standpoint, I start looking at it from the standpoint of what is the benefit that this is going to provide to this audience. For instance, if I'm doing a talk to, let's say, the human resources staff of a company, one of the things I understand is by speaking to their employees and teaching them more about what it means to be resilient and better deal with that adversity, I may be keeping them from having somebody who's on the verge of quitting or leaving to be gone. Now, for the company, the cost of them having to replace somebody who is there to have to go through the prospecting and the interview process and then the training of someone else, there is going to be a tangible expense that what that looks like. And so if I'm speaking to 500 people and this may keep 5 people there, now I've got a idea of what the benefit for the company is for me to come and speak and maybe save those couple of people that are going to remain that are sort of on the fence there. Then from there, being able to back calculate a portion of that is justifiable, and it is I can substantiate what that looks like and how that'll help them with retention overall. So understanding, you have to go and do some level of math to understand what it costs the company to go through something of this nature. But once I have an idea of what that looks like, then it makes it easier to say, okay, this is what you're going to benefit from having me speak. And this is, 10% of what that cost is justifies why I come up with that number. So that's one example.
Yeah, you can continue if you want.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, when it comes to working with individuals who are seeking some level of transformation that you can provide for them, then I think I look at it from the standpoint of how much is not having something in their life that I can provide truly costing them. Is it costing them years of time? Are they finding themselves, like I said, being stagnant for another 2 years beyond what it could be? Well, what is that worth to them? In some cases, it may be worth $5,000. In some cases, it may be worth $50,000. But what I understand is there has to be a way to, one, clearly articulate what working with you looks like and the benefits that come along with it. And then if you can state what that benefit. And for me, I'm going to use for an example the people who I help through my program called Happily Ever Interrupted. They're suffering from dealing with the loss of a close loved one, and they have not been the same ever since.
Hmm.
They may be struggling with what they're doing as far as being able to handle parenting their kids if they lost their spouse by themselves. They may be lost figuring out what they're going to do without that other person from a career financial standpoint. And so they've got all of these, and then the stress that comes in with them. Now, for me to help work with them on how to truly find out where their purpose and what their strengths are so they can go out there and find a job or an opportunity that's going to give them more income, that's going to make life a little bit easier for them. If I can work with them on how to be able to manage being, both mom and dad after they've only been mom and dad's not here anymore, then that's going to lower their stress and they're going to feel better and more happier and be more energized than they would be if they didn't have that help. And so all of these things, they serve some level of value to whoever you're working with. But it's important as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, to understand what thoughts are going through their mind and what they really need that's going to help their lives out. And so once you start to get that in, and then part of it is seeing what the market tells you. I wouldn't recommend going with a ridiculous price for working with somebody for 3 months if I wouldn't be willing to pay it myself. And so to me, that's part of how you start to determine. And when I found myself getting more clients than what I had time for, then that told me, okay, maybe I need to increase because I'm providing a lot of value. But at the same time, it makes it a little bit harder to serve everybody. But that's where, the experience as an entrepreneur starts to really get in there, and you start to say, okay, well, maybe I can drive up my price in order to grow my business, but also to be able to be at the balance that you want from a time versus money standpoint.
Wow. You've given us a full masterclass in just 5 minutes of your answers and response. And that is really, really profound because I work with entrepreneurs. I coach authors who want to profit from their books, who want to make money from their publishing. And one of the challenges that authors specifically and even other kinds of entrepreneurs face is that they do not know how to price their package based on the payoff. They price it based on the pieces, based on the product, based on the process, based on all the wrong things, because that's how we were taught in the traditional institutions. We were taught to measure value by how many courses are in the curriculum, or how many days you're going to spend, or how many hours of my time you're going to get, instead of about the pay. And that's why people go through these institutions. They come out with an expensive piece of paper and still don't know how to generate income. So you can see someone who is, an engineer, go through a traditional institution and learn the skill of, building all of these wonderful things with their engineering knowledge, but they have no clue how to make money from that skill, or how to find people who will pay them for that knowledge. And so when they come out of school, they now have to go through crash courses to even learn how to interview for jobs, as basic as that is, right? So, and all of this is, it's all connected. Whether you're doing this as a career professional, and all you just want is to change levels in your career or in your profession, or you want to be an entrepreneur who is able to package your promise, package what you know, and pitch it to the right people and get paid for that. This is very fundamental. And the reason why I'm going through all of these detail is because you may have the best product, but if you do not price it correctly, you will either repel the right customers and attract the wrong customers. Now, pricing has as much to do with your branding as much as than it has to do with just the price. The price is not just about the price. It has to be part of the entire ecosystem, right? And just listening to you talk, right? I believe you could see my facial expressions, right? It was just me processing all of this. So, right, I couldn't hold myself. I was just like trying hard to hold myself, but it is very fundamental, right? And there's a lot more we can say about all of that. How to articulate the value, and that's where pitching comes in, and that's what we'll be talking about next. But how to actually measure the value, it has to be measurable. Most
Yeah.
people, they are ambiguous in their claims, they are ambiguous in their talk, in their calculations. They cannot measure it, and they want people to measure their dollars and give it to them, because the money you're going to get paid is measurable. You want to monetize your mind, and you're going to get paid in measurable quantity. You have to measure the value of the results you're going to give them with the use of your mind so elegantly that people are like, what? You mean
Yeah.
I can get all of that for just this? And then they will happily pay. And the price at this point, if you do your job correctly, will be insignificant. It could be $5,000, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million. If you do an elegant job at articulating the payoff that the results you're going to give them with your mind is going to bring to them, they would happily pay. But enough said about pricing. Let's talk about pitching, because that ties directly into being able to price and being able to convert people. Because you mentioned something about conversion. So the pitching and the pricing, between the pitching and the pricing, conversion lies in between
Yeah.
those two, right? So
Right.
how do we build that connection? And just take it from there and talk to us about pitching correctly.
So I think pitching was something, as someone who was very analytical and logical, I had to learn that there is a element of marketing and sales that you have to do in order to get people to listen to you, to pay attention to you. So that's where the pitching comes into play. When you're pitching yourself, I think there's a couple of key things you have to be. It goes back to something you talked about earlier. When we're talking about value, what is the value you're providing? What is the value you're bringing? Can you articulate that in a concise, succinct manner, but truly get to the point without being so vague and ambiguous? And I think this is where some of the mind comes into play, because what sounds good to us may not sound good to the marketplace. And
Hmm.
so we have to realize that sometimes we got to get out of our own way. Sometimes we got to bring in the right help and resources to give us the feedback, because we are so deep in the weeds ourselves that we don't understand. We know too much.
Hmm.
We know the value that we can provide to people, but we don't articulate it in a way for someone who doesn't understand it as well as we do. And
Hmm.
so the vague may be good for somebody with a very high level of understanding, but for that customer who's on the fence, who's trying to figure out if this is for them, you got to be somewhat specific and clear without um, without going too deep to drive them or intimidate them or drive them away. And so that perfect balance between who you are. Like you said, your branding is key. Your branding is what's going to attract them to you in the first place too. You're going to also have to have you're gonna have to be able to show them the benefit and what that value looks like, and even paint that picture of what the outcome is going to be. And like you said, ideally, once you get to that place, you're going to find yourself where you where price does not become the number one decision making variable in the process.
Hmm.
So I think all of that comes, but then you also have to practice. There's another P in here. You
Yeah.
can't there and wing that pitch every time, wing what you're going to say. The more you practice on being able to be clear, to be succinct, and to be able to address it in a way that is going to highlight the problem that they may have and highlight how your solution helps eradicate that problem, then you are, and then go into what your method of being able to provide it. That program, that what that keynote, what that training, what those things look like for the person to be able to decide if they want to work with you. So all of that plays a role. That all is a part of the process in order to go from pitching to being profitable and understanding what that price looks like and get those conversions in between.
Absolutely. And you know what? You even said it earlier, like you need to find someone who is elite at this, if this is something you struggle with, because many people, they are stuck like chalk in a pickup truck because they want to experiment their life away. They want to waste precious years of their life doing what doesn't work, chasing freebie seekers, chasing dabblers all over the internet, simply because they do not want to invest in a program or invest in working with a mentor or a coach that can literally guide them or point them to the right direction in them figuring out a better way to say what they do in a way that's compelling enough to pay them at any price, right? Because I find that you can have something really good to say, but if you have a very bad way of saying it, nobody cares. Nobody's going to listen to you. So
Yeah.
you not only want to have something good to say, you not only want to have a phenomenal idea in your mind, you want to have a phenomenal way of saying it, articulating it, because your communication is what will directly influence the compensation that you receive, not necessarily your implementation. So most entrepreneurs, most creatives, they focus so much on implementation. They focus on that skill, how they can implement really well, how they can demonstrate their skill really well, and then they pay no attention to how they can communicate the implementation value of what they do so well that people are happy to bring them compensation or remuneration. And that is something I have discovered in my journey working with people, working with authors will spend time, resources, night and day, sweat and blood, writing wonderful books. And then they'll spend no time learning how to sell those books, learning
Yeah.
how to pitch the outcome of those books. And it's easy to see just from the way they title their book that they've spent little or no time thinking about how they're going to sell that book, because all they want to do is they want to write, they want to tell their story. So they spend all their resources, all their energy in the implementation aspects, and they spend no energy in the communication aspect. They think that when they're writing the book, that's the communication, but no, that's the implementation. When you're
Mhm.
selling it, that's the communication, and that's what directly results in the compensation that would end up getting you paid and keeping your bank account full of handsome sums of money. So having said that, let's go now to the positioning, right? What do you think entrepreneurs, creatives can do about positioning that can help them monetize their mind effectively?
Well, I think that that's where being able to be seen and recognized as a expert or as a thought leader in what you're doing is so important. And for those who may not feel that way or be that way, the imposter syndrome may kick in. You have to believe in yourself and what you're doing. You
Hmm.
can't just you can't be a lukewarm, timid entrepreneur. You can't just think that, okay, well, I'm okay at this. You've got to have the mindset that I'm bringing value to people.
Hmm.
And what am I going to do? And why should they listen to me? If you can't explain or believe why they should listen to you, then you're not going to get people to listen to you. No. So I say that to start off when we talk about positioning, because you got to believe that you are bringing value to people before you're ever going to be able to truly bring value to them. That's the first thing. Two, when it comes to positioning, where are these audiences? Where are these people? Are they in a Facebook group about a certain thing? What are you doing to capture their attention? I'm a big believer in using your social media to magnify your message, to let people know what value you're bringing out there to the world. Give them some insight, some nuggets that they can use from you in order to say, okay, well, I like this guy, I trust what he's saying, and I see that he's done this before, and I see that he's done this for other people. These are the areas in which you are creating a digital footprint and social proof that you are great at what you do, which makes it easier for you to be positioned as someone who has done things. I've got pictures and video of me on stage in front of thousands of people. And it makes it easier for someone who's looking to book an event to say, okay, he looks like he's done that before. I see that he's done that. That is part of the positioning. That's part of the image that I want them to think of when they think of Tyran Jackson. And
Hmm.
so that is part of the strategy in order to lead to the pitch, to get the conversions, to be able to establish that price and get to the prosperity. But oftentimes, I think people just think that if I create something, people are magically going to come. But that's where you positioning yourself in a place that separates you from others and shows where your expertise is so critical and important.
Wow, awesome positioning. That is another very, very, you know, interesting piece of the puzzle that most people leave out, right? And positioning also ties into messaging, actually, right? The branding, the messaging, everything has to be congruent, right? And when you lock that in, it becomes easy for people to see that you're the only option. There's no competition, right? So most entrepreneurs, they want to outsource their positioning to external parties. They want someone to position them. They want someone to sell for them. They want to put their expertise, in the hands of other people, instead of taking ownership of that journey and their positioning and their branding in a way that they become in a category of one, right?
Yeah.
Where there's no alternative to them. Here's what God said. God said, I am God and there's none beside me. That's positioning right there. God is saying,
Right.
hey, I'm the only one that there is in my category. I'm one of one. I'm in a position that there's no one next to me. Right? He says, I'm God and there's none else. Whoa. When I
Yeah.
read that scripture, or when that scripture opened up to me as being an insight into how you can actually position yourself in a class of one, right? The word holy actually means to be set apart, to be sanctified. That's positioning right there, right?
Yeah.
But because we read scripture and we read religious connotations into scripture, we miss all of these fine grained details that even the Almighty has baked into and weaved into the fabric of scripture for us to benefit from. So, positioning is so crucial, right? As a creative, you have to take ownership of that and know that in everything you do, you want to position yourself as one of one. Because if you are not one on one, you become a commodity. You become a victim of commoditization. So people are going to say, "Hey, how much do you charge?" And then you're going to say, $100 per hour. They're going to say, "But the other guy down the road charges $50 per hour." So okay, let's go for the other guy. That alone should tell you that you've got work to do with your positioning. Because when you position rightly, there's nothing to compare you with in the marketplace. There's nothing
Yeah.
to compare me with in the marketplace. There's nothing to compare your prices with in the marketplace. It's either you or nothing. And when people decide that they want to work with you, they're going to tell themselves, if I don't work with this guy, then it makes no sense. I'm not working with any other person, or I'm not buying any other thing from any other person. That's what happens when you position correctly, right? And so that brings us to packaging, which is the very first thing we talked about that we're going to unpack when we reverse engineer the whole thing. So, Tyron, do you want to walk us through how to actually package your mind? Can you imagine packaging something intangible?
Yeah.
And when we're talking, you may be misled to think we're only speaking for people who are in the knowledge business, like coaches, authors. But don't get it twisted. If you're a creative and you have an idea that can generate impact for people, it could be an idea of an invention. This is also beneficial to you, right? So, Tyron, do you want to take us through that journey as we talk about packaging?
Yeah, I think when we start talking about packaging, to me, I see packaging as the way that we're providing our solution to our audience. For those who are creatives, um, if you're an artist, you're going to have a painting that you put together, which is going to ultimately be a tangible item that you provide to somebody. But from a packaging standpoint, how are they going to be aware of what this looks like? Maybe you have examples of work that you've done to give them an idea that you can have in some capacity to show them this is sort of the type of thing that I do, and that gets in it. But then ultimately, how are you giving and delivering that end product? All of that goes into the package. When I think about it from a somebody who uses his mind for a lot of what I'm doing, the packaging is part of what just builds that understanding and awareness for who I am and what I do. And that is part of the marketing content, the materials that I have, the what people see before they actually see me or talk to me. And so when you're a creative, you have, if you're music, if you're, like you said, creating inventions, anything that you're putting together and gonna get out there into the world, you have to have a way of getting what's out of your head on paper, on some way for it to be displayed, in some way for it to be at least noticed and consumed to some capacity by your audience. And this is where you just got to go ahead and start. You got to start, creating it. But that packaging is going to be something that is going to be necessary for you to deliver it to your customer. I know that I've got customers who my package is part of the coaching sessions one-on-one that they may have with me. I know that there are other times where I'm going to have them not necessarily work with me, but they're going to see me online doing my workshops. And that's part of the package, or getting the course, or even when I'm when I'm presenting on stage, that for me to even get to that point, I had to have something that was put together to allow for that to happen. And that's where having those tangible, those assets that people can digest on their own was part of the packaging of me and my brand. So, and within that, you want it to represent you in the way that you that is going to be most appealing to whatever the need, and really being able to solve the problem that you're solving for them. So we're getting back to problem and solution in some ways, and how you're showing them how to get there is all part of what they're going to see. I do a lot of things with video links, a lot of things with PDFs that I provide. All that's part of the packaging to make people familiar with me before they ever speak to me.
Wow. And that is so phenomenal. What you just talked about is like an ecosystem of products, a product ecosystem, and you can only have that through product innovation. When we talk about packaging, just to add, what comes to my mind is the man Steve Jobs, with the way he created an entire industry. In fact, he created about 3 to 4 different industries
Yeah.
with his invention because of the way he packaged his ideas. With his invention of the iPhone, with his invention of the iPad, with his invention of the MacBook, everything he did stood out because he was in a class of his own, and In fact, he rubbed it on the faces of his competitors, like the Windows people and all of that. How that Mac was way better, was in a different class, was exquisite when it came to packaging, and he kept improving on that. Right. So what we're saying in essence is, you don't have to have the most expensive gears, to create the best packages. But with what you have, how much can you ingrain your personality and
Yeah.
ingrain quality into whatever you do? So let's put it let's put it down to a very basic level, like for a content creator or a photographer or a videographer. You may be saying, I don't have the high end camera that cost millions of dollars, but I have this low budget camera, this GoPro camera. So at that level, how can you package your content in such a way that it can produce a transformation for someone on the other side? How can you create something with what you have right where you are in a way that when people encounter that thing, they can see your blueprint on it and they know that this thing is different from every other thing, right? When you get your packaging skills, your implementation skills to that level, then you're on the way for something really, really good, right? You're on the path to monetizing your mind. So I just wanted to add that. And yeah, let's bring it back home, Tyron. What do you have to say to people out there who are battling with imposter syndrome? They are battling with analysis paralysis. They're battling with I'm just meitis, like my business coach would call it, the inflammation of the I'm just me gland. People who are battling with all of these mind challenges, these battles in their mind, people who are holding themselves back, people who have buried their gifts, skills, and talents, people who have lost their creative touch and their creative edge because they've been sucked into the hustle that they are in, a 9 to 5 grind, and they've just had this dream sitting down somewhere in their hearts that I wish that one day I'll be able to monetize my mind. Or people who have already attempted at monetizing their mind. Maybe they've written a book, they've created a song, they've done some creative work out there, but still they're asking themselves, why ain't I rich and famous yet? Because nobody knows them, nobody cares about them, nobody's buying from them, nobody's consulting with them, nobody's hiring them, nobody's inviting them. I know there's so much in there, but I want to give it all to you so that you can do what you do and give us a way to help all these people as we bring our conversation to a close. Yeah.
Well, so one of the things that I think that we have to do, that they should do, is um, spend time looking at themselves in the mirror. And what I mean is face your reality. If
Hmm.
you understand that you can't do everything that you say you want to do by operating in the same way that you have, then that's a good thing. The problem is if you think that things are suddenly going to change without actually making a change,
Hmm.
then you're going to be misled. This leads to having to understand that, look, there are people who have done things that we haven't done before. And when you start to actually intentionally seek out the right help to give you clarity, to give you a process and a path, and to even walk you through those first steps, then it becomes easier to see where that goes. A lot of people have vision, but they have no plan.
Hmm.
And so without having that strategy and that plan, or even communicating with somebody who can help you establish and create that, then you're gonna have a hard time getting there. So that's one of the biggest things. But however, the reason why I say they need to look in the mirror is because sometimes, and I've been victim of this before, you have this naivete, this optimistic perspective on how easy it's going to be to get there.
Hmm.
When in actuality, it's a lot harder and a lot more complicated to turn those thoughts, those ideas into actual revenue generating sources.
Hmm.
So what I've found and understand is to be able to have those right mentors, those right coaches, those right individuals who can help you accelerate that process and increase the likelihood of results. And so that's probably one of the biggest things. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out something with a lesser likelihood of success than you probably will by investing in the right help from the right people who can help make that pathway to getting at least out the blocks and started smoother. And then once you're running at a smooth pace, then maybe it might be time to elevate to that next level and
Mm,
scale and make
mm,
things even more automated, more systematic, to where it's not requiring as much of your time to get even greater results. So, but a lot of times we have. I know I say you got to believe in yourself early. You don't want to be victim of having too much belief in yourself that you cut off your desire for resources that can help you.
mm.
So
Thank you so much, Tyron. And on a closing note, I'll just make this quick analogy. I just came to my mind while you were speaking. Like, think about this bottle of water. It can exist in a different state. It can exist in a gaseous state. It can exist in a solid state. All that needs to happen to this water is to experience transformation. And for that to happen, it has to expose itself to different conditions. It could be refrigeration if you want to turn it to solid, or ice. It could be evaporation, heat, a high temperature for this water to turn into its gaseous state, right? So you are right here listening to us, and you have the best ideas, and those ideas are probably in its liquid form, or let's say it's in its gaseous form because it's not tangible yet. So those ideas you have are in its gaseous form, and you want to condense that idea to something tangible. You want to liquefy that idea, and productize that idea, and solidify and concretize that idea in ways that can be packaged, positioned, pitched, and priced, so that you can actually monetize your mind. I hope this helps. I think this will be a great place to bring our session to a close. Tyron or Tyran, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I want to say thank you for coming on the show. I hope you had a nice time having this conversation.
yeah, I did.
Yeah, and I believe the same is for those of you listening on the other side. If that's the case, why don't you hit the share button, share this transformation with someone out there, because when they remember who gave them access to this level of insights, your name is going to pop up, and they're going to be forever grateful to you for sharing this with them. On this note, I'm going to leave it here. I'll see you on the next one. Till then, have a good one, and bye bye.